American sailor Henry Palmer and his crew made landfall on an island near the Antarctic Peninsula, later named Deception Island. The events that unfolded over the following 2 days were shrouded in mystery and the extraordinary. Palmer, for a prolonged period, kept the gruesome details concealed, only revealing the disturbing incidents shortly before his death in 1877. The narrative took a darker turn 137 years later when a team of Australian scientists arrived on the island, unveiling even more horrifying occurrences. This added to the growing belief that Deception Island should be left untouched and uninhabited. Over the years, research stations were established and subsequently abandoned, with some reasons for abandonment remaining enigmatic. The events that unfolded in 1957 remained shrouded in secrecy by the Australian government for decades, until Richard McCready, an American-born scientist, decided to break the silence about what occurred. This is Henry Palmer's account, translated into modern English. Upon setting foot on the shores of the island, later named Deception Island, a wave of unease swept over me. Having visited numerous shores during my years as a sailor, this unfamiliar sense of anxiety left me somewhat overwhelmed. Surveying the surroundings, I couldn't shake the eerie feeling of being watched. While the island was not expected to harbor any inhabitants besides wild animals, an unsettling notion persisted. I instructed my men to establish camp just above high tide, considering the approaching evening and our unfamiliarity with the area we planned to explore at first light. Each morning, as we established camp on a new shore, we conducted a head count to ensure no one had disappeared overnight. I vividly recall the moment during our first morning when, as I took a sip of coffee, a cry echoed, "Norris and Clark are missing." Rushing to their tent, I confirmed their absence. Gathering everyone, I swiftly organized 4 search teams to scour the island, emphasizing the need to be armed. Taking 2 companions, we embarked in different directions, discussing possible whereabouts and scenarios. Walking along the beach towards a rocky outcropping, we speculated on their possible location and the events that might have transpired. Enforcing a rule that no one leaves camp without informing me or George's senior assistant, even for basic tasks, we maintained visibility, recognizing the uncertainties of the uncharted territories we traversed. After a while, we stumbled upon human footprints in the sand, accompanied by clothing belonging to one of the missing men. The presence of something else in the sand immediately heightened our suspicions. We observed drag marks in the sand, indicating that something had been dragged towards a nearby cave at the base of the cliff. I instructed Edward to stand by with his rifle, sensing that something was amiss. "Yes, sir," he replied, raising his rifle to his shoulder. With caution, we approached the cave, and I drew my gun from its holster, preparing for potential danger. The air was thick with tension as we advanced, our silence accentuating the gravity of the situation. These men were sailors, not soldiers. However, my experiences in the War of 1812 had instilled a certain apathy that lingered throughout my life. Alongside it, an unsettling intuition warned me of impending calamity, a burden I carried like a curse. Without words, I conveyed my decision to go first, emphasizing the principle of not shooting unless ready to kill. Leading these men, I never mandated anything I wasn't willing to do myself. Reaching the cave's entrance, I discerned its profound darkness, penetrated only by faint light. Before venturing into the cave, I took a deep breath, concealing the fear that always gripped me in such moments. I never let it show, especially to my men. My premonitions, though accurate, remained unsettling, and I never grew accustomed to them. Stepping into the cave, I heard unsettling sounds, gurgling and wheezing. Glancing back at my men, I realized they hadn't perceived what I had. Undeterred, I pressed on, gun at the ready, prepared for any sudden attack. Navigating deeper into the cave, darkness enveloped us, prompting me to instruct my men to light candles. As the flames flickered, an indistinct moan and movement reached my ears. Straining to discern the source, I continued until a sharp turn loomed ahead. Sensing imminent danger, I alerted my men to be prepared. Their eyes reflected fear, mirroring my internal struggle to maintain composure. Advancing around the corner, I abruptly halted. The lifeless forms of Norris and Clark lay naked on the ground before me. I stood there in disbelief, confronted with the macabre scene before me. The skin had been meticulously removed from their bodies, rendering them unrecognizable, as if they had been turned inside out. Overwhelmed by the grotesque sight, I struggled to distinguish one from the other. Suddenly, the closest figure looked up at me, raised his hand, and uttered indiscernible words. Hastening to his side, I knelt down, witnessing sheer terror in his eyes. In his hand, I noticed an unusual bright red stone. As I inspected the other lifeless man nearby, I observed the same crimson stone clutched in his hand. Yet, he seemed lifeless. Simultaneously, the man's hand dropped, and the stone rolled across the cave floor. When Edward moved to retrieve it, I intervened, cautioning, "Edward, don't touch it. We have no idea what it is." He recoiled, pressing his back against the wall. "What happened to these people, sir?" he queried. My response reflected my bewilderment. Something unholy. What could do this to a person? Nothing on this earth that I know of. I instructed them to fetch the rest of the men and blankets to transport the bodies back to camp for a thorough examination. Waiting in the cave for the men to return, a palpable fear enveloped me, and a realization dawned that we needed to depart the island at the earliest opportunity. Despite our initial plan to stay for 6 days, an urgent sense prevailed, compelling us to leave the very next day. As the men returned and encountered the grisly sight of Norris and Clark without their skin, a somber atmosphere overcame the camp. The men crossed themselves, offering prayers and speculations about the inexplicable phenomenon circulated. Some deemed it the work of the devil, while others attributed it to witchcraft. Uncertain of the truth, I only knew one thing. We had to evacuate the island. Instructing the men to wrap the bodies in blankets, and forbidding anyone to touch the enigmatic red stones, we transported them back to camp. Despite our subsequent examination, no answers emerged, only more perplexing questions. Later that day, we somberly laid Norris and Clark to rest. The events of the following day solidified my resolve never to set foot on Deception Island again. Upon waking, I directed the men to swiftly dismantle camp after breakfast. However, their urgent calls interrupted my packing, and I rushed in their direction to discover the source of their distress. Approaching the men, I witnessed one of them pointing toward something. As I halted to survey the scene, a confounding sight awaited me, one that still eludes understanding. Before me lay the empty graves of Norris and Clark. The immediate suspicion of body exhumation by one of the men was swiftly dismissed. I knew their overwhelming fear of the inexplicable events would prevent such an act. "Gather your belongings, men. We are leaving now," I declared, and never had I seen my crew move with such urgency. During our hasty departure, the men exchanged speculative conversations about the mysterious happenings. Overheard remarks emphasized the belief that the island harbored malevolence and should be avoided. I concurred with this sentiment, coining it the Island of Deception, aspiring to discourage others from venturing there. This encapsulates Macready's account, a narrative he was warned against sharing, but chose to disclose, feeling a debt to the departed companions. These 5 friends, including Macready, had a shared history that spanned many years. The incident occurred in January as summer commenced, in proximity to an active volcano, contributing to a warm atmosphere, with temperatures occasionally soaring to 104° F. The initial week following our arrival proceeded with normalcy and routine. However, on the 8th day, a shift in events marked the beginning of an intriguing phase. My recollection is vivid of 2 colleagues and geologists, Ian and Ross, returning from their day of exploration on the island, armed with sediment samples from the volcano and various intriguing finds. Late that night, I awoke for a visit to the restroom and passed by the room where Ian and Ross were engrossed in studying their collected samples. Their prolonged presence struck me as peculiar, but I dismissed it, assuming their excitement about the findings was keeping them engaged. Standing closely together with their backs turned, they were engaged in hushed whispers, seemingly half asleep. At the time, I paid little attention, but in hindsight, it marked the inception of something ominous. The following morning, as I headed to the dining room for breakfast, I passed by the same room, only to find Ian and Ross standing in the identical spot. Recalling seeing them late the previous night, I inquired, "Hey, morning, guys. Have you been standing there all night or something?" They turned their heads to acknowledge me and nodded silently without uttering a word. I lingered for a while, anticipating a reaction from them, but none came. They simply turned their heads back without acknowledging my presence. Proceeding to the dining hall, I couldn't shake the perplexity surrounding Ian and Ross's behavior. As I entered the cafeteria, Peter and Max were already engrossed in their breakfast. Seating myself and joining them, I queried, "Did you guys interact with Ian and Ross this morning? They've been acting strange." Max responded, "No, I saw them in the room, but I didn't talk to them. Why?" I recounted the peculiar encounter, explaining, "Well, I saw them there late last night in the same spot they were in this morning. When I tried to talk to them, they just turned their heads and nodded without saying anything." Peter mused, "That's strange. Maybe they're just too excited about the stones they found. You know how geologists get excited about rocks they've never seen before?" "Yeah, maybe," I agreed, and we finished breakfast in silence. Following the meal, I returned to my room to dress and prepare for the day's activities. As a marine biologist, my plan was to spend the day exploring the beach for different marine life. Passing by what I had jokingly termed Ross and Ian's stone room, I observed their absence. Curious, I went to their rooms to check, but they were nowhere to be found. Adhering to station protocol, anyone leaving was required to inform someone of their destination and expected return time. I informed Peter and Max about the situation, but they dismissed it as a simple oversight. Throughout the day, as I explored the beach, collecting and examining marine life, a lingering unease persisted. I felt a constant sensation of being watched, as if someone stood just behind me. Upon returning to the station, Max and Peter were there, wearing expressions that immediately alerted me that something was amiss. "What's going on?" I inquired. "Ian and Ross should have returned by now." "They know the protocol," Max responded. Seeking a course of action, I asked, "What do we do?" Peter replied, "What can we do? It's getting dark, and I'm not keen on roaming the island in the dark, are you?" "No, but we have to," I insisted. Peter suggested, "It'll be cold tonight and they might be dressed warmly enough to survive. Let's wait here in case they come back. If not, we'll wake up early and search for them before dawn." I nodded in agreement and Max added, "I don't understand what they're thinking. They know better than this." That night, as the 3 of us had dinner, A somber silence enveloped us. I don't understand what was going on in their minds, but a myriad of thoughts raced through my head that night. Sleep eluded me, and I found myself grappling with peculiar thoughts as I lay in bed. Peter arrived at my room early, proclaiming that it was time to get dressed and resume our search. Without a word, I sprang out of bed, preparing myself for the biting Arctic cold. Despite an entire day spent scouring the surroundings, we unearthed no trace of Ian and Ross. Upon returning to the station, we immediately attempted to call for help on the radio. Max managed to establish contact with someone on Livingston Island who promised assistance, but informed us it would arrive the next day. They assured us they would also notify our Australian headquarters about the situation. After a quiet dinner, we retired to our rooms. Exhausted from the day's extensive hiking, I swiftly succumbed to sleep. Suddenly, I jolted awake, startled by frantic cries for help echoing through the stillness. Unsure if it was a dream, I strained to identify the source of the distress. The desperate pleas continued. "Someone, please, God, help me." Uncertain about who was in distress, I swiftly grabbed the flashlight I kept in my room and raced downstairs to Max and Peter's quarters. Approaching Max's room, I discerned an unsettling noise, resembling chewing and teeth chattering. As I cautiously entered, raising the flashlight, disbelief gripped me at the unimaginable sight. Two figures, devoid of skin, were devouring Max. Upon spotting me, they turned and fixed their gaze upon me. Without a moment's hesitation, I fled to Peter's room, urgently shouting for him to wake up. "Peter, get up now!" I shook him vigorously, conveying that something terrible had happened to Max. Still groggy from deep sleep, Peter questioned me about the situation. I hastily explained, "I'll tell you later. We need to go. Something is horribly wrong." As Peter's face contorted in horror, I turned to see what loomed behind me. "Oh, dear God," Peter exclaimed. "Get up now," I urged. Before I could finish, the skinless figures began to advance. Eager to create distance, I veered to the right. Unfortunately, this move left Peter vulnerable, and the two assailants seized him. Pinned against the wall, I watched in horror as the skinless entities mercilessly attacked Peter, tearing into him with a gruesome savagery. I've never heard more chilling screams in my life than those echoing from Peter. Driven by the urgency to help him, I decided to fetch the fire axe we kept in the hallway. As I turned to leave, one of the skinless figures turned its attention towards me, starting to advance. Panicking, I instinctively switched to survival mode. Instead of grabbing the axe, I bolted for the dining room, contemplating the idea of hiding in the refrigerator. I was aware of the cold risks, but in the heat of the moment I didn't care. As I sprinted down the hall, I passed a coat rack, hastily grabbing one of the down jackets we wore outside. Reaching the dining room, I made a beeline for the refrigerator, swung the door open, and hurried inside. Without wasting a moment, I unraveled twine from a food box, securing it tightly around the refrigerator's handle and a nearby sturdy shelf. After tying the knot, I donned the down jacket and retreated from the door. It wasn't long before I heard a scraping noise, suggesting someone was attempting to open the refrigerator door. The force outside exerted immense pressure on the twine, and I anxiously watched it strain to its limits, praying it would hold. This tension persisted until I made the decision to extinguish the lantern, plunging the interior into darkness. I settled into a corner, huddling against the wall in an attempt to preserve warmth. The makeshift attire I had on instead of proper pants offered little protection against the cold, and I feared succumbing to hypothermia before rescue arrived. The next recollection I have is jolting awake, barely catching someone's shouts. "Is anyone here? Is anyone here?" Startled, I stumbled to my feet, approached the refrigerator door, and began pounding on it, repeatedly announcing my presence. "Hi, I'm Jorgen from the Norwegian research station on Livingston Island. We're the ones you called for help yesterday," he declared in a sturdy Norwegian accent. I swiftly turned on my flashlight, returned to the door, untied the twine, and swung it open. The sight of Jorgen standing there was the most welcome image of my life. Eagerly scanning the surroundings, I inquired, "Did you encounter individuals without skin when you arrived here?" He regarded me with a puzzled expression, as if struggling to comprehend my English, and replied, "No, we haven't seen anyone else since we arrived. We discovered 2 rooms with beds drenched in blood and scattered red stones, but no signs of anyone else." "Is there anyone else here?" Jorgen inquired. "No, I don't think so. I'm the only one left," I responded. Jorgen led me to meet the 3 other men who had also arrived. As we passed by Ross and Ian's bedrooms, the scene was gruesome, with blood-stained surroundings and the red stones strewn on their beds. The stone room we used for our geological samples also had those same vivid red pebbles scattered on the floor. Although uncertain why, a suspicion lingered that these red stones were somehow linked to the horrifying events. Unfortunately, the truth remains elusive. Upon learning of the incident, the Australian government dispatched a specialized team from Australia to investigate and locate the missing scientists or their remains. Despite weeks of diligent searching, no trace was found. Years later, in Australia, McCready encountered a man who claimed to be from the same investigative team. He asked numerous questions about the island incident and revealed that they too faced challenges during their inquiry, although he offered no details. When McCready sought information to help close the case, the man cryptically responded, "Stay away from this island." For more chilling tales, please subscribe.